All right, let's jump into this. Hello, everyone. I'm Ken Cerini. I'm Managing Partner of Cerini Associates. I would like to welcome you all to this Cerini Associates Annual Nonprofit Conference. Nonprofits are just one of the many industries that we at Cerini Associates serves, but it's one of the most important industry specializations, which represents over 300 nonprofit organizations and about 2/3 of what the firm does. So this is really an important part of who we are at Cerini Associates. It resonates completely with the firm and our firm beliefs. Before we get started, I do want to take care of some administrative stuff. So if anybody wants copies of the speakers' presentations, they will be posted within the chat at the beginning of each presentation. So we'll be posting those each time that we do a presentation. Unfortunately, all participants will be muted throughout the session. We do ask that if you do have any questions, thoughts, comments, anything that you want to share with people, let's try to make this as interactive as humanly possible. Please drop it into the chat. It's really hard for me to monitor both the chat and the Q&A. So if you have anything, please just put it in the chat as opposed to using the Q&A. I would greatly appreciate it. This is a tight community, so let's kind of keep that community flowing through that chat. We are recording today's conference, and we'll be emailing it out to all of the participants and our nonprofit mailing list. That'll be going out probably by the end of the week. If you found all or any part of this useful, please feel free to share it with others within and outside of your organizations. It's a big community. We want to keep the community informed. Please remember that all of the opinions and comments made today are those of the speakers. Please reach out to professionals you work with for more, or the speakers themselves for more specific information that might be germane to your particular case. We want to hear back from you to understand what worked and what didn't work today, what topics you liked, what you'd like to hear about, how the speakers were, etc. There will be an evaluation form. Please take the time at the end of the conference to complete the evaluation form. If you do need CPA, and we are offering 4 hours of CPA today, you must complete and return the evaluation form. So that's the administrative part of all of this, and that gave a bunch more people a chance to jump on. So I want to spend the next roughly 43 minutes or so talking about the state of the nonprofit sector. So 2025 came in as a lion for the nonprofit sector, with the new presidential administration impacting the nonprofit landscape on day one with a series of executive orders that came out, which had a significant impact on the sector and on the economy, followed by a series of tariffs. If anybody's following what's going on, we have these tariffs that are out there that are expected to double the anticipated inflation for the year. We were expected to only have about a 2% inflation for the year. We're looking at that now probably being closer to 4 or a little over 4. So that is going to increase the level of demand for nonprofit services, especially in the health and human services area. Unfortunately, it does not look like a lamb is anywhere in the political or economic forecast, with additional potential cuts expected from the administration. Again, there is a big, beautiful tax bill that's out there that is calling for more cuts, and we're expecting throughout the administration additional cuts taking place. Much of this, if you think about it, was expected. If you look at the Trump administration, the first time Trump was in office, there were proposed cuts in the nonprofit sector, and President Trump was pretty clear in his intentions of what he was going to be doing with respect to the nonprofit and other landscape during his political campaign. I think what's a little bit different about this administration than the last administration, in President Trump's last administration, he did not have control of Congress. This time around, he does have control of Congress. It's not a big control of Congress. It's a small control of Congress, but there still is that control of Congress. There's a whole lot of uncertainty and plenty to be concerned about in the nonprofit sector. And I'm not trying to get scary or anything. I just think it's important for people to understand where we are right now, where we're going. And I think that's kind of helpful in some of the decision-making process. And we'll talk about that. One thing I can say about the nonprofit sector, which has been pretty steadfast throughout, is that the nonprofit sector has always been resilient. We got through COVID, we got through a lot of things. We're going to get through this too. With nearly 117,000 nonprofits in New York State, which represents about 6.5% of the nation's 1.8 million nonprofits. It is urgent for nonprofits to come together through umbrella organizations to speak with a common voice. Having 1.8 million or 117,000 different agencies going up to the powers that be and trying to state their story is not going to work. We have to utilize the umbrella organizations that we have, and anybody who is part of the pre-networking session we had heard me talk about this during that session, but we do have to come together as a sector. We do have to change some voices, right? There aren't a whole lot of, I guess there isn't a whole lot of differential between the Republicans and the Democrats in the House. So if we can just flip a couple Republican votes, that could have a dramatic impact in terms of changing the outlook of the sector over the next 4 years. So that's going to be super important in terms of what we talk about. If you think about it, last week, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the members of the House Ways and Means Committee approved the tax code overhaul sought by President Trump. They were hoping to incorporate that into what's called, as I said, the Big Beautiful Bill, which includes several campaign promises that Trump put into place, including he's looking to eliminate the income tax on tips. In order to be able to meet the tax cuts that the Trump administration is looking to do, part of that bill includes cuts to spending on Medicaid and food assistance programs. While several of the Republicans in New York State, I think there were 4 of them in general, it was Mike Lawler from Rockland, Nick LaLota, and Andrew Garbarino from Long Island, and Elise Stefanik from Northern New York. They're against the bill. So they are not in favor of the bill, but not for the reasons that we would hope. They're not in favor of the bill because there's a section of the bill that talks about state and local taxes and the deductibility of state and local taxes, where there's a deduction built in, where right now the current deduction for state and local taxes, including property taxes, is $10,000. The bill would raise that up to 30. Here in New York State, the property tax and everything is so much higher, they want that number to be higher. So they oppose the bill, not for the cuts due to Medicaid or to food programs, but because of some other provisions that exist in the bill. But those 4 votes, considering that the Republicans only hold a 218 to 215 margin in the House, those 4 votes are enough to swing the vote on that bill if things go true to political party. So while that is, while the 4 of them are not championing what we need them to champion, I want to just stress the fact that 4 votes, 4 New York votes, can go a long way in changing what we're looking to have changed. The whole Medicaid cuts and everything, when you consider that about 35% of New Yorkers are covered by Medicaid. So, any cuts to Medicaid assistance programs will be devastating. So again, I think right now we're at a tipping point within the nonprofit sector, and it's time for everyone to come together and advocate for the sector. So I want to kind of spend, like I said, the next 40 minutes or so talking a little bit about what's happening in the sector, what we're seeing in the sector, what we can do as a sector to kind of help and drive change, which I think is super important. Again, if anybody has questions, please just drop those questions into the chat. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. So as I said, on day 1, the Trump administration pushed out certain executive orders. There were executive orders with respect to the protecting American against invasion. And when he talks about invasion, he was talking about invasion from our borders, Canada and Mexico. Really, this was a way of kind of controlling the whole issue with illegal aliens. And that has created a lot of problems with respect to ICE. We've talked to several of our clients who have shelters or food pantries, and a lot of the individuals who used to come and receive services are a little scared because of the fact that they're afraid of the increased ICE activity that we've seen around these facilities. The reevaluating and realigning the United States foreign aid, which is going to impact support for foreign nonprofit organizations or NGOs. They rely heavily upon federal funding. In the past, federal funding has contributed approximately $20 billion a year to these programs, which includes things like climate issues and education and health and feeding of foreign individuals. Putting America first in international environmental agreements, unleashing American energy. This is setting the whole environmental world back several years, eliminated the push towards alternative energy sources. There was a demand for a certain percentage of the cars being electric over the next few years. That's gone now, and is moving back towards the reliance on fossil fuels, which obviously is having a major impact on climate and climate-based organizations. It's pulled, the United States is pulled out of several international climate groups. Again, this is really going to have a big impact on environmental and climate-based organizations. Ending illegal discrimination, restoring merit-based opportunity, getting rid of, in essence, the whole concept of DEIA, and we'll talk about that more in a couple minutes. And defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth, which is having an impact on the LGBT community and support of LGBT based organizations. Anybody who was at the Long Island Imagine Awards and heard David Kilmnick from LGBT Network speak, there's a lot of passion there in the LGBT world. As I said, I'd come back to the illegal discrimination and restoring merit-based opportunity. If you kind of look at what's happening on the college front in Harvard University, the whole aspect of restricting race-conscious admission practices, and Harvard's standing up to the government and pushing back, and the government now, as part of that big, beautiful bill, looking to add provisions that would tax endowments and stuff. So there's a bit of back and forth here, and in terms of the political arena, and there's a lot of fear that if you do stand up, what is that going to do to ongoing funding for your organization and stuff. The whole DAIA initiatives, I know in the pre-networking, Judy Siegel had mentioned that there's going to be a training, and we'll push it around with respect to some of the HR impact of the DEIA initiatives. I think one of the biggest issues that we're seeing and that we're hearing from our clients is that a lot of our clients rely upon a certain type of recruiting, where they're trying to work with individuals within certain communities, and they need to recruit individuals from those communities. And how do those practices work on a go-forward basis if you're not allowed to identify or pre-identify some of the where, let's say I'm working with a community that is predominantly Hispanic, and I'm only going to be able to connect with that community if I have Hispanic employees. How does that impact my ability to hire people that are really going to be reflective of the communities that I serve? So those are all going to be issues that come into play. As I mentioned, during the first administration, President Trump tipped his hand a little bit about what we can expect to see now, a little foreshadowing. During his first administration, President Trump proposed eliminating the National Endowment for the Arts. There's nothing out there right now discussing this, but that was something that was on the table during the first administration. As I mentioned, the administration is withdrawn from several international agreements. During his first administration, Trump tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act and implement significant changes in healthcare funding that could have a detrimental impact on healthcare overall. Trump's 2021 budget proposed cutting $1.6 trillion over 10 years from programs that help people with lower moderate income needs. That could have, again, a significant impact if we start seeing some of those cuts. And some of that stuff is already happening with respect to the proposed $80 billion of Medicaid cuts that are in place. Gift and estate tax thresholds. I bring this up because if we're going to see a large level of wealth transference, there's a direct connection between tax rates and contributions made by individuals to nonprofit organizations. In effective January 1st of 2026, the gift tax rates are supposed to drop down to $7 million. So basically that means that each individual can shelter $7 million of their income, of their assets. Anything over $7 million is subject to federal gift tax. And that federal gift tax is a 50% tax. So anything over $7 million will be taxed at 50%. So there's an incentive to give to nonprofit organizations because it only costs 50 cents on a dollar to give. That threshold, if the big beautiful bill goes through, would increase and permanently move up to $15 million with annual increases based on COLA. So again, that's a big difference if you think about the number of people who now will be covered under a larger threshold. Some of the other things that we're seeing out there, as we talked about back in January when Trump came into office, there was a temporary freeze overall in terms of grants as the various funding agencies of the government were tasked with changing some of the wording within the contracts. That was shot down pretty quickly. Again, that mobilization and resiliency of the nonprofit sector coming together to shoot this down. But again, it's just really the starting point of what we're seeing. There's been cuts in HHS grants to the tune of about $12 billion. We've seen a $230 billion cut in SNAP. Refugee resettlements have received $36 million in cuts. So the cuts have started and they're going to unfortunately continue. As I mentioned, there's proposed Medicaid cuts of about $880 billion between 2025 and 2034 that are part of this big, beautiful bill. That works out to be an overall 11.8% annualized reduction, which threatens healthcare nonprofits overall. One of the things that you should look at is there's a little link here within the handout. This link links back to the impact it would have on every single state. New York State, as I said before, 35% of the people in New York State receive some level of Medicaid funding or Medicaid support. So New York State is a large user of Medicaid. They are the second largest user of, the biggest user of Medicaid funding. And if these cuts go through, they would have the second largest reduction in Medicaid funding, about $10 billion. The only state that would have a larger cut is California with $13 billion worth of cuts. So these cuts are going to have a big impact on where those dollars are going to come to be able to make up for that shortfall from those government cuts or federal cuts is going to be anybody's answer. From a tariffs perspective, as I mentioned, there have been tariffs put in play. That those tariffs are driving up costs. And as costs go up, people have less spending potential. And if people have less spending potential, there tends to be a larger demand on the services that nonprofit organizations provide. We're also expecting large supply chain shortages over the next, probably starting late in the second quarter. So maybe sometime around, late in the third quarter, sometime around July, August, and moving into September, October. And the longer those tariffs remain in effect and aren't alleviated, the longer those supply chain shortages will be in effect. You know, there were tariffs put in place to try to support more American growth and American growth in business. But the infrastructure for that growth wasn't set in place before the tariffs were put in place. So there'll be delays. So what can we do to mitigate some of those federal cuts? First of all, we can, as everybody's been talking about, diversifying revenue streams. And I want to say that sounds great in practice and theory, I should say, but it's not that easy in practice. You know, everybody's looking to do the same thing. There's only so much you can go back to your donors and ask for more money from your donors, especially since we're seeing a decline in the number of donors on an annual basis, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the overall donor base is down about 30% over the last 25 years. So again, look for some earned income models wherever you can kind of put in place earned income models. That will be super helpful. Try to find ways to better communicate with your donors and develop deeper relationships with your donors. That's going to be super important. Ways that you can find to partner with with for-profit businesses and corporations. Finding ways to collaborate with other nonprofit organizations also will be super important. There's a small organization here on Long Island called Allied Foundation that provides diapers and women products to more than 50 different nonprofit organizations. So finding those organizations that provide services that you need, that can provide them to you for free for things that you would have bought in the past without them, are ways that you can kind of find ways to streamline and think better in terms of how you can kind of mitigate some of these costs. Also, things like crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is great if you're in a situation where you have a finite project that has a set amount of money. Let's say you want to buy a piece of land for $500,000 or something like that. Crowdfunding is a great way to do something like that. We talked about forging the strategic partnerships already with other nonprofit organizations and with for-profit businesses and even government. We talked about enhanced advocacy earlier, where again, we really need to make sure that we're talking with a one voice. It's important to focus on storytelling. It's important to donors. They definitely want to understand and hear the impact that you're having, and they want it to be personal. So try to make your stories and your appeals more personal. In terms of other things, leveraging technology, there are a few slides in here that touch on leveraging technology. I don't know if I'm going to get to them, but we do have sessions later in the day with respect to technology. Definitely look to attend those. From a leveraging technology perspective, anytime you can try to start incorporating a little bit more of that AI into the mix. We're seeing a lot more AI used from a fundraising perspective to be able to better communicate with donors. We're also seeing it used in terms of some financial analysis and things like that. So different ways to kind of leverage the AI world. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the economy. So as I mentioned earlier, that originally coming into this year, everybody expected the inflation to be about 2%. That was the level the federal government kind of laid out, where once we got to that 2% level, they were going to, or as we got closer and things were moving in that direction, they would do things like lower interest rates and everything else. With the tariffs that have been put in place, we're seeing an uptick in inflation, not a downturn in inflation. We're expecting inflation for the year to be closer to 4%, if not more than 4%. So that is going to have an overall impact in terms of the economy. For the economic growth, there was an original anticipation of an economic growth, which for 2024 was about 2.8%. That's been downgraded to 1.5 to 2%. Actually, the first quarter of this year, we actually had a contraction. We didn't have growth. We had a 0.3% contraction. And if you have 2 quarters of contraction, that's actually considered a recession. So if the second quarter, which kind of ends in a little over a month, winds up in a contraction, also we could be sitting in a recessionary period. Unemployment rates are expected to stay stagnant. They ended last year at 4.2%. They're expected to end at 4.2% again for 2025. That means there's approximately 7.2 million Americans out of work. Interest rates, again, we thought those interest rates would be coming down, not a lot, 0.25% to 0.5% for 2025. Now we're not so sure that we're going to see any drops in interest rates, and those interest rates may stay up. It just makes the price of borrowing, especially with a lot of the grants that you're getting being held up by the government. Anybody who's working with New York City or Suffolk County or some of the other counties, are getting frustrated from the fact that the money is just not flowing the way it needs to be flowing. They're tapped out on lines of credit, and that borrowing is just more expensive because of the interest rates up at the level that they're at. Charitable contributions were originally expected to increase by about 3.9%. With the stock market, at the beginning of the year, the stock market was doing very, very well. The stock market is now in a situation where it's pretty much flat for the year. So unless we see kind of growth in the stock market, because again, the stock market drives donations, it's going to be, it could be a lean year for nonprofit organizations. One of the things we are seeing from on a charitable front that is a positive, some of the foundations have dug a little deeper into their pockets and are giving out larger percentages this year than they have in the past, because they understand and know that there's an issue here and they need to make a difference. But again, that only works if their portfolios are getting bigger. Right now, like I said, it's pretty much stagnant for the year. So we'll have to see how the balance of the year goes. Again, with the demand for services is up due to tariffs and executive orders and everything else. And as we've been talking about, we expect an overall decline in the amount of government funding we're getting. Federal level, we're definitely going to see cuts on the federal level. And as those cuts happen at the federal level, you get a trickle-down impact to the state and local level. So some of the challenges for the nonprofit, again, rising costs, which reduces purchase power. Nonprofits are struggling to maintain services as demand is growing. So that becomes kind of an issue. Donor retention is declining. There was a 3.4 drop in the number of donors in 2023. Small donors there's less small donors out there. The $50 to $100 donors are just not out there the way they were. And like I said before, there's a 30% decline in the overall number of donors out there. High net worth donors are increasingly using structured giving or donor advised funds. So instead of that money finding its way to nonprofit organizations, they're kind of storing it away in donor advised funds for a rainy day for some time down the future. We just have to let our donors and make them understand that today is that rainy day, and those dollars needs to flow out of those donor advised funds. The Fidelity Donor Advised Fund is the largest nonprofit in the world. And we need to see some of those dollars start rolling out of those donor advised funds so that they can do good things with your organizations. And we talked about the erratic, sluggish economy may impact giving. So we'll see where that goes. So if we look at how do we go about budgeting, again, something we talked a little bit about during the networking pre-meeting. So if we look at where nonprofits generate their funding from, 30% of nonprofits get their money from government grants. And if we think about it, as we said, we're under pressure and we're expecting to see government cutbacks at the federal level, which will trickle down to the state and local level. Individual donations represent about 45% of all of the money coming into nonprofit organizations. And again, with the sluggish economy, I think, and the lower stock market or flat stock market, you're seeing that donors are a little skittish and they're kind of holding on to funds to see where the economy goes overall. Foundation grants, again, with a stagnant stock market that could have an impact on the grants. As I said before, the foundations are opening their wallets a little bit wider. And then earned income and corporate with rising costs, that leaves people with less resources. So that, again, could impact the overall earned income marketplace. So again, when we're going through and we're doing our budgets, for anybody who is working now on getting their June 30th budgets in place, or anybody who has been monitoring their December 31st year-end budgets, I think it's really, really important to do contingency or scenario-based budgeting, where you focus on like, where do we expect the world to be? That's our best approach model, and then maybe drop it down by 5 or 10%, and then maybe a little bit more in terms of a worst case scenario. Really outline what that budget would look like, and then add in some factors in terms of, all right, so if we do have to cut by 5% or 10%, if we do have to cut by 15%, what does that look like? Where are those cuts going to come from? If that means, and unfortunately for most nonprofit organizations, the labor cost is the largest component of your budget. If that means you're going to have to cut from a labor perspective, what are you doing in terms of pre-identifying who those cuts are going to be? I think it's super important, especially if nonprofits aren't meeting with their boards on a monthly basis. If they're meeting every other month or quarterly, you want to be in a position where you get the board to buy off on what these contingent budgets will look like, so that if you do have to react quickly, you can. If you wait another month or two, that could have a dramatic impact overall on the finances of the organization. Some just key things to think about. Again, analyze your grant reliance, how much you're relying on government grants, what happens if those government grants don't come through, what's the likelihood they will, to what level have you had communication with your funding sources to find out if the funding is expected to continue or not. It's tough because, in some instances, like last year with the New York State budget, early intervention was given a 5% increase in the New York State budget. And then, the years gone by, here we are a year later, and that 5% never got paid out. So even though there's expectations, sometimes those expectations don't wind up in realization. So it's really important to kind of understand and have those conversations and talk to your umbrella organizations to find out where things are really headed. We talked about scenario budgeting. We talked about diversifying revenue streams and finding ways to maybe open up more deeper, meaningful conversations with your donors to try to get more dollars coming in. How do we optimize or minimize our costs? How do we cut costs where we can, look for ways for collaboration and everything else we talked about? And then ongoing monitoring and adjusting of the budget to make sure that we understand how we're spending with respect to that budget, and if we're running into some problems, what we need to do from a deeper cut perspective. Some of the things that you definitely should be doing or looking to do in terms of maybe redeploying resources. You definitely want to invest in fundraising, invest in stronger CRM systems so that you have a better understanding of what your donors look like, why they're giving to your organization, and how you can leverage them. The more you're able to target the donation requests to your donors, the more likely donors are going to give. Targeted requests result in 40% better results from a donation perspective. Collaborate with peers, come up with some level of shared costs. We're seeing a lot more community-based funding that's taking place, where foundations want a particular solution within a community, and they're looking for nonprofit organizations to come together to kind of create that solution. Obviously, continue to monitor the policies with your umbrella organizations and advocacy groups to figure out where things are going, and invest in yourself first. Look to try to set aside some money where possible to build reserves. The more fiscal stability you have in your organization, the more you can ride through recessions and storms like we're seeing now. And fiscal stability and extra reserves also provides the ability to take advantage of opportunities as they come along. Kind of mentioned this quickly before, but and I've mentioned it in the past, but we have this great wealth transference that's taking place. Again, I stress, and I've talked about this in the past, but I stress the fact that if you've got large donors, you want to communicate with those donors, you want to meet with their families and gain an understanding of whether you have support at all levels of the family or just at the patriarch or matriarch level. What happens when your largest donors start to pass away? Are you going to continue to get funding from the family that they're in or not? Because the kids have a different donor base that they want to give to. We also talked a little bit about the fact that you want to really understand who your or get the younger generation, your millennials and Gen Z and even higher Gen X generations involved with your nonprofit organization. Even if they don't have the financial wherewithal to support you, if they can support you through volunteerism stuff, If you can get someone to volunteer for your organization, they're 40% more likely to give to your organization down the road. On top of that, you're building a base for succession planning for your board. So a little bit about where fundraising was in 2024 and where we're projecting it. So 2024 total giving was 557.16 billion, which was down about 2.1 after being adjusted for inflation. Quarter four, there was a 3.5% increase in dollars raised, but a decline in donors by about 4.5%, an 8.8% decline in small donors less than $100. So as I said before, those small donors are disappearing, and organizations are being forced to rely more and more on large donors, large donations. And if you don't have them, those types of donors supporting you, what are you doing to try to kind of pull them into your organization? As the original philanthropy outlook for 2025 was total giving was supposed to be up about 3.9%. We're not sure if we're going to see that. Again, it's going to be contingent upon where the market lies. Foundation giving is expected to be up by about 5.3%, which I think is going to hold because foundations are giving more from what we're hearing. And individual giving has historically been about 63 to 67% of the total. Q1 2025 estimate, we're still waiting on the final numbers, 2 to 4% increase in dollars raised, and again, a continued decline in donors. So some of the top fundraising trends that we're seeing, as I mentioned, community-centric fundraising, foundations and donors giving to build donor communities and to have an impact on a specific community. Using AI and data analytics, how do you go about kind of leveraging the information you have about your donors to try to get those donors to contribute more to your organization and to have more targeted communication with those donors? If you have that targeted communication and you're having that regular communication, you have a greater likelihood of being able to go and hit them up for a bigger ask. Recurring gifts, if you're not already doing it, when you set up your donation, if someone makes a contribution, at the end of the contribution, there should be a little pop-up that says, would you like to convert your contribution to a recurring gift? If you can get people on that recurring gift, put it on their credit card, it's like a gym membership. It goes on and on and on, and people don't typically turn that off. More reliance on social media and other influencers to kind of help talk about and push your organization and your mission and the need for dollars. Direct messaging, so that's using things like Facebook Messenger or Instagram DM. Those types of things are going to be super helpful. You're seeing a 16 times higher open rate than emails. So if you can communicate with your donors through social media, they're more likely to see that messaging, which means they're more likely to donate to your organization, and it definitely fosters stronger and real-time engagement with your donors. We're seeing a resurgence in direct mail. So, one of the things is that emails are getting caught up in spam filters, emails are getting not opened and everything else. So, emails, while they're great and they're cheap, they're not as effective anymore because people aren't necessarily getting them. So the more you can kind of look for ways to really target your direct mail campaigns, the better off you're going to be. Corporate giving and matching. We're seeing an uptick in corporate giving and corporate matching. So again, make sure you remind your donors about that. And then, everybody wants a clear link to how their donation is creating impact. You want to have that transparency. You want to have the impact. You want to tell stories. You want to make it personal. The more you can do things through video, the better off you're going to be. Tell those stories. Have your the individuals you serve tell their stories. The more you can kind of do that, it builds trust, it builds retention, and everything else. Talked about some of these already, so I'll go through these really quick because we only have about 6 minutes left and I'm only about 60% through the slides. Actionable strategies, diversify channels, combine digital, email, social media, traditional direct mail, events, all that stuff together to create that diversification. The more diversification you have, the better off you're going to be. You don't know what the strategy is that's going to attract. And then monitor. Make sure that you look to see what's having the results, what's getting you the return on investment, so you can kind of replicate more of that. Engage your donors, especially the younger donors. Target your Gen Zs, your millennials via social media, crowdfunding, things like that. Invest in technology. It's super important to have information so that you're making the right decisions when you're making decisions. Focus on major donors. They're the ones who are giving right now. So the more you can get in front of the more affluent, larger donors, the better off you're going to be. That's what's kind of buoying the whole charitable giving these days. And then prioritize retention of your donors through recurring gifts, impact reporting, ongoing communication, storytelling, all of those things to keep those donors engaged with your organization. And again, one of the biggest issues we're seeing out there is donor fatigue and donor decline. From a social media perspective, just really quick, Facebook is still the main place where donors are hanging out. Facebook, 57%. Instagram is 21%. Twitter's 13%. YouTube is 5%, and LinkedIn is 4%. Donor engagement, 32% of donors are inspired to give via social media. So again, try to do that more. Post with images, see 650% more engagement. Short form videos are preferred by 73% of consumers. All of these things are super important when you're developing your media and donor campaigns. The average person now spends about 2 hours and 23 minutes on social media. So it's a great place to get your messaging in front of them. These slides are available. I just want to kind of go through some of these really quick. In terms of posting, nonprofits post about 5.95 times a week on Facebook and about 4.59 times a week on Instagram. Add investment to your strategic plan with regard to fundraising. You need to invest in social media. You need to invest in social media ads and stuff. Storytelling, 79% of donors say behind the scenes videos drive giving. 50% of recurring donors engaged via social media campaigns. Try to use influencers where possible. We talked about storytelling strategy, so I'm kind of going to skip through this, but that's all here. From a employment perspective, I only got about 3 minutes left. We do have a whole topic on employment, as I said earlier. So kind of if you need employment issues or have employment issues, kind of tap into that. One of the biggest things we're seeing is employee turnover challenges. I think part of the reason that those challenges are there, obviously nonprofits don't have the same deep pockets that for-profit businesses have. But I think also there's lack of communication with your employees, lack of communication with respect to upward growth, where they can grow to, what opportunities are available for them if they stay with and work within your organization. Most employees want flexible work environments. I know that's very difficult for many nonprofits who need to have their staff on site, but maybe you can consider some sort of non-traditional work schedules. Maybe instead of working 5 7-hour days, they work 4 9-hour days or 4 whatever it is hour days to kind of streamline some of that. Try to add AI into your HR function. It's great for reducing the time to hire. It allows for better recruitment, going through first drafts of resumes and everything else. Prioritizing employee well-being. 40% of nonprofit workers report burnout. Only 20% are passionate about their roles. I think it's important for you to kind of understand that. We are going to have a Cerini connection with respect to mental health coming up next month. So again, something to look at. Some well-being priorities. 62% of job seekers prioritize mental health resources. 57% of employees say flexible schedules improve well-being. So what can you do to kind of improve that? Succession planning, only 27% of nonprofits have documented succession plans. 75% of nonprofit leaders plan to leave within 5 to 10 years. So you're going to have an overall lack of internal talent pipelines and stuff unless you do more and more leadership development. 80% of nonprofits lack emergency succession plans, and 50% of boards are unprepared for executive transition. So it's really important to kind of build all of that. I know there's a bunch more slides that I have, but if we're going to stay on track, I kind of have to end it here, everybody. These slides are available. I do appreciate everybody kind of sitting through this and listening to me kind of talk at 300 miles an hour for 45 minutes. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the day, and I'll see you again later this afternoon. Take care.